Beat me in chess and I'll marry you. The declaration echoed through the marble lobby of Sterling Dynamics, causing everyone within earshot to stop what they were doing and stare. CEO Victoria Sterling stood beside the massive glass chess set that dominated the building's entrance, her perfectly manicured hand resting on the white king piece as she addressed the small crowd of employees gathered around her. At 35, Victoria was everything the business world expected from a female tech mogul: brilliant, ruthless, and absolutely convinced of her own superiority. She'd built Sterling Dynamics from a startup in her garage into a billion-dollar empire, crushing competitors and acquiring companies with the cold precision of a chess grandmaster. Which was fitting because Victoria was also the reigning state chess champion. "I'm serious," she continued, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who'd never lost a game that mattered. "Any man in this building, employee, executive, visitor, doesn't matter, beat me in a single game of chess, and I'll marry you on the spot." The crowd murmured with nervous laughter. Everyone knew about Victoria's chess obsession. The lobby set wasn't just decoration. She'd defeated hundreds of challengers there over the years, including several chess masters who'd been foolish enough to accept her public challenges. "Of course," Victoria added with a smirk, "when you lose, you're fired." The nervous laughter stopped immediately. "Ma'am, is this some kind of publicity stunt?" asked James Miller, the company's head of marketing, clearly wondering if he should be filming this for social media. "No stunt, James. I'm completely serious. I'm 35 years old. I've built an empire, and I'm bored out of my mind. The only man worthy of marrying me is one intelligent enough to beat me at the thing I do better than anyone else." "But the firing part," someone started to ask, "is necessary to make this interesting," Victoria interrupted. "Anyone can play chess badly. But if you're going to waste my time by challenging me, you better be confident enough to stake something meaningful on the outcome." Dr. Richard Hayes, the company's chief technology officer and the closest thing Victoria had to an intellectual equal, stepped forward. "Victoria, this is crazy. You're rated 2400. Most people here barely know how to move the pieces. Then they shouldn't challenge me, should they? What if someone actually beats you?" Victoria's laugh was sharp and confident. "Richard, I've been playing chess since I was 5 years old. I've beaten grandmasters. I've studied every opening, every defense, every endgame scenario worth knowing. The chances of someone in this building beating me are approximately 0. But if it happens, it won't happen. But yes, if by some miracle someone manages to checkmate me, I'll marry them. Tonight, I'll have my lawyers draw up a prenup that gives them $10 million just for being clever enough to win." The crowd was growing larger now as word spread through the building. Employees from every floor were gathering in the lobby, pulled by a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. "Any takers?" Victoria asked, settling into the chair behind the white pieces. "Who thinks they're smart enough to marry a billionaire?" For several minutes, nobody moved. The stakes were too high, the consequences too severe. Victoria Sterling wasn't known for empty threats, and getting fired for losing a chess game seemed like a particularly stupid way to end a career. Then Dr. Hayes stepped forward. "I'll play." Victoria's eyes lit up with predatory excitement. "Richard, excellent. Our CTO versus our CEO. This should be entertaining." The game lasted 47 moves. Richard played well, better than most people could have managed against Victoria's aggressive style. But the outcome was never really in doubt. Victoria systematically dismantled his position with the patience of a spider wrapping up prey, until Richard's king was trapped in an inescapable mating net. "Checkmate," Victoria announced, tipping Richard's king over with one finger. "Richard, clean out your office. Security will escort you out in 30 minutes. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Richard Hayes, a man with a PhD from MIT and 15 years of experience, was fired for losing a chess game to his boss. "Next," Victoria called out cheerfully. "Anyone else think they can outsmart me?" For the next 2 hours, a parade of brave or foolish men tried their luck against Victoria Sterling. Marcus Chun from accounting lasted 12 moves. David Rodriguez from legal made it to 26 moves before falling to a devastating queen sacrifice. Tom Wilson from sales was checkmated in 8 moves after attempting an opening he'd clearly learned from YouTube. All of them were fired. By 6 p.m., Victoria had defeated 11 challengers, and the lobby had largely emptied as word spread that the CEO wasn't kidding about the consequences of losing. Victoria sat alone at the chessboard, slightly disappointed that the entertainment had ended so quickly. "Excuse me, miss?" Victoria looked up to see a black man in his 50s wearing a janitor's uniform, holding a trash bag and looking uncomfortable about interrupting. "Yes," Victoria said impatiently. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I need to empty the trash bins around the chess set. Would it be okay if I worked around you?" Victoria was about to wave him away when she noticed something that made her pause. The janitor's eyes weren't looking at her or the trash bins. They were studying the chessboard with an intensity that seemed out of place for someone whose job was emptying garbage. "What's your name?" Victoria asked.
Jerome Washington, Mom.
"I've been working here about 6 months." "Jerome, do you play chess?" Jerome shifted uncomfortably. "A little bit, ma'am. Nothing serious." "A little bit," Victoria repeated, amused. "Jerome, have you been listening to my challenge?" "Yes, ma'am." Hard not to hear it from across the lobby. Victoria leaned back in her chair, studying Jerome with new interest. In all her years of playing chess, she'd learned to recognize the look of someone who understood the game. Jerome had that look. "Jerome, what do you think of my position here?" Victoria gestured to the board, which still showed the final position from her game against Tom Wilson. Jerome glanced around nervously, clearly not comfortable being put on the spot by the CEO. "Ma'am, I really should get back to work. Humor me. What do you see?" Jerome looked at the board for exactly 3 seconds. White's got a forced mate in 2 moves. Queen to h5, then queen to h7 if black moves his king to g8, or queen takes h7 if black moves his king to h8. Victoria's eyebrows shot up. Jerome had instantly seen the mating pattern that had taken Tom Wilson 15 minutes of staring at the board to miss. "That's correct," Victoria said slowly. "Jerome, where did you learn to play chess?" "Here and there, ma'am. Picked it up over the years." "Here and there." Victoria stood up and reset the pieces to their starting positions. "Jerome, I'm going to make you an offer." "Ma'am, I really can't lose this job. I've got rent to pay and—" "If you beat me," Victoria interrupted, "you won't need this job. You'll be married to a billionaire. If you lose, you're fired." "But Jerome, I'm getting the distinct impression that you're not going to lose." Jerome stared at her in disbelief. "Ma'am, you can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. Sit down." "Ms. Sterling, I clean offices for a living. You're a genius businesswoman and a chess champion. This isn't a fair fight."
Victoria smiled.
"Jerome, nothing in life is fair. But sometimes that works in unexpected directions. Sit down and play." Jerome looked around the nearly empty lobby, then at the chessboard, then at Victoria's expectant face. Finally, he set down his trash bag and took the seat across from her. "I'll take black," he said quietly. Victoria moved her king's pawn 2 squares forward, the most common opening move in chess. "Your move, Jerome." Jerome studied the board for a moment, then moved his queen's knight to f6, a solid, classical development that immediately told Victoria this wasn't going to be like her previous games. Victoria continued with a standard opening setup, developing her pieces toward the center of the board with the methodical precision that had made her famous. But something felt different about this game. Jerome wasn't playing like someone who'd picked up chess here and there. He was playing like someone who understood the deep principles of the game. By move 6, Victoria realized she was in trouble. Jerome's moves were simple, elegant, and devastatingly effective. He wasn't trying to create complicated tactical fireworks or show off his knowledge of obscure openings. He was playing pure, classical chess, developing his pieces harmoniously, controlling key squares, and slowly building pressure against Victoria's position. "Jerome," Victoria said as she contemplated her seventh move, "where did you really learn to play? Does it matter, ma'am?" Victoria studied his position. Her usual aggressive tactics weren't working because Jerome wasn't giving her any weaknesses to attack. His pieces were perfectly coordinated, his king was safe, and he was beginning to seize control of the center of the board. "It matters because you're playing like a master." Jerome made his seventh move, a quiet pawn advance that looked innocuous but actually set up a devastating tactical sequence.
Ma'am.
Victoria stared at the board in growing amazement. She could see the trap Jerome was setting, and she couldn't find a way to avoid it. In 3 moves, he was going to have her king in checkmate, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. "Jerome," she said quietly, "show me." Jerome moved his queen to d1, giving check to Victoria's king. She was forced to move her king to the only available square. Then Jerome moved his queen to d8, again giving check. Victoria had only one legal move. Finally, Jerome moved his queen to d4. Checkmate. Victoria stared at the board in stunned silence. Her king was trapped, attacked by Jerome's queen and unable to move to any safe square. It was mate in 3 moves from a position where she thought she was winning. The few remaining employees in the lobby had gathered around the chess set, drawn by the realization that something extraordinary was happening. They watched in absolute silence as Victoria Sterling, the woman who'd never lost a game in public, who'd fired 11 employees for failing to beat her, slowly tipped over her king in surrender. "That's impossible," whispered Sandra Kim from Human Resources. "She never loses," muttered Frank Torres from Security. But Victoria wasn't looking at her employees. She was looking at Jerome Washington, who was sitting quietly across from her with the same humble expression he'd worn when asking permission to empty the trash. "Jerome," Victoria said slowly, "who are you?" Jerome was quiet for a long moment before answering. "My name is Jerome Washington. I'm 53 years old. I have 3 children, and I've been working as a janitor for the past 2 years." "That's not what I meant." Jerome sighed. "I know what you meant, ma'am. Tell me." Jerome looked around at the crowd of employees staring at him, then back at Victoria. 15 years ago, I was Dr. Jerome Washington, professor of mathematics at Howard University. I had a PhD from Princeton, tenure-track, research grants, the whole academic life." Victoria felt her world shifting. "What happened?" "I had a breakdown. Depression, anxiety, couldn't handle the pressure of academic life. Lost my job, lost my savings, lost everything. Spent 10 years trying to get back on my feet, working whatever jobs I could find. And the chess. I was rated 2,600 before I lost everything. I played in tournaments, taught chess to supplement my academic salary. I was good enough to make master level, but not quite good enough to make it as a professional player." Victoria stared at him. "You're a chess master." "Was. Haven't played competitively in over a decade." "Jerome, why didn't you tell me this before we played?" Jerome smiled sadly. "Would you have believed me? The black janitor claiming to be a former university professor and chess master? Or would you have had security escort me out for lying?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Victoria realized that Jerome was right. If he'd walked up to her and claimed to be a chess master, she would have assumed he was either lying or delusional. She would never have given him a chance to prove it. "Besides," Jerome continued, "I needed this job. I've been rebuilding my life for 2 years now, and I couldn't risk getting fired for being presumptuous. But you risked it tonight. Tonight was different. Tonight, you made it clear that you were looking for someone worthy of your respect. Someone intelligent enough to challenge you." Jerome stood up from the chess table. And ma'am, with all due respect, intelligence isn't about money or position or social status. It's about how you think, how you solve problems, how you see patterns that other people miss. Victoria felt like she was seeing Jerome clearly for the first time. Not the janitor who emptied her trash, but the brilliant man who'd been invisible to her despite working in her building for 6 months. "Jerome," she said quietly, "I made you a promise."
Mom.
"I said I'd marry anyone who could beat me at chess." Jerome looked uncomfortable. "Ms. Sterling, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. Promise is a promise." Victoria stood up and faced Jerome directly. "But I have a question first." "What's that?" "Why? Why did you really accept my challenge?" "It wasn't about the marriage proposal, you barely know me. It wasn't about the money, you're too practical to gamble your job on a chess game." "So why?" Jerome was quiet for a long moment. "Because for 6 months, I've watched you treat me like I was invisible, like I was furniture that happened to walk around and empty trash cans. And tonight, for the first time, you looked at me like I might be worth talking to. That's it. Miss Sterling, do you know what it's like to be highly educated, to have spent years developing your mind, and then have everyone around you assume you're stupid because of what you do for work?" Victoria felt heat rising in her cheeks. "I didn't challenge you to win a bet or prove a point," Jerome continued. "I challenged you because I wanted to be seen, really seen. For 3 moves, I wanted someone to look at me and recognize that I'm more than my job title. And now," Jerome smiled, "now I should probably clean out my locker and find another job." "No," Victoria said firmly. "You're not going anywhere."
Mom.
Victoria turned to address the crowd of employees who were still staring in amazement. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to meet Dr. Jerome Washington, the new Director of Strategic Development for Sterling Dynamics." The crowd erupted in surprised murmurs. "Ma'am," Jerome said, "you can't just. I can do whatever I want. It's my company." Victoria looked directly at Jerome. "Dr. Washington, you have a PhD from Princeton, teaching experience, and clearly strategic thinking skills that I've been too blind to recognize. You're wasted emptying trash cans." "But the marriage proposal," Victoria held up her hand. "Jerome, I made that offer because I was arrogant enough to think no one here could beat me. I was wrong about that, and I was wrong about a lot of other things too." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "You won the game, so technically you won the bet. But marriage should be about more than chess skills. Don't you think?" Jerome smiled. "I do think that, yes ma'am. So here's my counterproposal. Take the job, let me get to know the man behind the chess master, and we'll see what develops naturally. And if nothing develops, then you'll still have a job that actually uses your brain instead of just your hands." Jerome extended his hand to Victoria. "Miss Sterling, you have a deal." As they shook hands, the crowd of employees burst into applause. But Victoria wasn't thinking about their reaction. She was thinking about how many other brilliant people she'd overlooked because they didn't fit her expectations of what intelligence looked like. "Jerome," she said as the crowd began to disperse, "can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Do you think less of me for not seeing who you really were?" Jerome considered this question seriously. "Ms. Sterling, I think you're a woman who's been taught to value the wrong things. But I also think you're smart enough to learn better. And patient enough to teach? That depends. Are you a good student?" Victoria laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. "I guess we'll find out." 6 months later, Victoria Sterling and Jerome Washington were having lunch in her office, discussing the quarterly reports for his strategic development initiatives. Jerome had transformed from janitor to one of the company's most valuable executives, developing innovative approaches to market analysis that had already saved Sterling Dynamics millions of dollars. But more importantly, Victoria had learned to see people differently. "Jerome," she said as they finished reviewing the numbers, I have a confession to make. What's that? That chess game wasn't really about finding a husband. It was about proving I was smarter than everyone around me. I know. You knew. Jerome smiled. Victoria, you're brilliant at business, but you're not subtle about your motivations. That whole performance was about dominance, not romance. Then why did you play? Because I recognized something in you that you didn't recognize in yourself. Which was loneliness. You'd built walls so high to protect your success that you'd forgotten how to connect with people as equals. Victoria felt her throat tighten with emotion. And now you have someone who can challenge you intellectually without feeling threatened by your success. Victoria looked across her desk at Jerome, the man who'd beaten her in 3 moves, who'd shown her that intelligence came in forms she'd never bothered to look for, who'd taught her that true partnership required seeing people for who they really were rather than what they appeared to be. Jerome, can I ask you something? Always. That marriage proposal? Is it still on the table? Jerome's eyes twinkled with amusement. Are you asking me to marry you, Victoria Sterling? I'm asking if you'd consider dating a woman who was smart enough to finally figure out what really matters. And what's that? Finding someone who makes you better than you thought you could be. Jerome reached across the desk and took her hand. Victoria, I thought you'd never ask. As they sat together in the office where Victoria had once proven her superiority by defeating everyone who challenged her, she realized that the most important victory was learning that being beaten by the right person wasn't a loss at all. It was the beginning of everything that mattered. The chess set in the lobby remained, but it was no longer a symbol of dominance. Instead, it had become a reminder he'd won the heart of a woman who'd finally learned that true intelligence isn't about proving you're better than everyone else. It's about recognizing brilliance wherever it appears and being humble enough to learn from it. And sometimes the most beautiful checkmate isn't the one that ends the game. It's the one that starts everything else. Before you go, smash that like button, share this with someone who needs to see it, and tell me your biggest takeaway in the comments. Subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.